So maybe we could start, and you can just tell us, you can introduce yourself to me. You can just talk to me.
Okay. I'm Viola Cudjoe Jones, aka Baby Doll. I'm a Seminole Freedman and proud to be one. And we are talking today about the Seminole Freedmans. And what would you like to know?
I remember Rashawn Jones, and he had a brother, a twin brother. I was introduced to them by their mother, Theola Cudjoe Jones.
Yeah, that'd be my mom's house up there. We call it the big house.
The Cudjoes were a very important family in the Seminole Nation.
Hey, Ross.
The two twins were excellent athletes, football players, basketball players, and they were recruited and accepted to the Haskell Indian College because they were Seminoles.
I wanted Roshan and Roman to go to Haskell University because I wanted them to know both sides of their culture and to know the African side. To make it real, they needed to know the Native American side.
But because they were freedmen, Haskell didn't let them use the library or treat them at their infirmary. I don't think anyone could take it to the level as they can't study in the library, or if they're hurt playing football, can't be treated by the school hospital. Tell them if there's somebody coming on those. When we grow up here, we learn about the land run. Kids dress up in pioneer clothing and they run and stake their claim. But what isn't told is the land that they were taking had been stolen from the Indians, and that there's a huge history before that, and a very powerful and wonderful history that existed in Oklahoma. I was a Native American Studies major at Cal Berkeley. I got recruited to play for the U.S. rugby team in the Maccabi Games, which is this Olympic festival every 4 years in Israel. I just graduated law school, and I was supposed to be studying for the bar, and I didn't. I went to Israel instead. Point this right to where you're throwing, right? I got back 10 days before the bar, and I thought I had no way I was going to pass it. You're not going to have a chance to move off a scrum. So I come back, and somehow I passed. 1 month after passing the bar is when Sylvia Davis came to my office. She was like a congresswoman for the Seminole Nation.
I'm a school teacher. I've been teaching for 15 years. My great-great-great-grandmother was a full-blood Indian. This is real what we are doing. That's right.
She said her son went in to get clothing assistance, and there's money that the tribe had that gave each kid for school clothing. They said, well, you can't have this. And she says, why? I said, well, you're black. She says, don't you know who I am? I said, on the tribal council. And they said, yeah, we know who you are, and it's not for you.
They put up a resolution to get all blacks out the Seminole Nation. And it was all voted out and kicked out the same night. Going on, it's still going on. We are still being treated the way that they was treating us back then. Right. And this is something that needs to come to an end.
Give me an example of what you experienced in some of those tribal meetings.
At one of my council meetings, I had a tribal member that sit across from me, using the word nigger, nigger, nigger. And then the chief of the Seminole Nation standing at the podium with a smile on his face. Good evening to everybody. I do have a name. My mama didn't name me no nigger. My name is Sylvia. You can address me by that name. We want them to just be treated fairly. It's what we want, to be treated as people. And this is the reason why I am so committed with this case. It's due to the hurt and pain that my family went through.
No man cometh unto the Father but by...
I took on her case. I've been fighting for the freedmen continuously since, and I would rather be unpaid on this side than be paid to be on that side.
I always knew that we were Cherokee people. My first memory of that is when I was 5 years old. I was in school, in kindergarten, and a boy, he asked me what kind of an Indian that I was. So I asked my dad, and he said, well, we're Cherokee Indians, but he said, we also have some colored blood.
I hope each and every one of you have a good time, a safe time, and hope you feel our Cherokee hospitality. God bless each and every one of you, and good luck with the prize money.
I'm descended from a Cherokee Indian named Ryder Fields.
My question from you is not only coming from myself, it's coming from my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my mom, my dad, my cousins. I've grown up with this situation. I've grown up hearing about the freedmen. What we've never heard, though, is why do the freedmen want to be Cherokee? And I'll say it like my grandpa said.
Well, I'm not a freedman, but I've talked to a lot of them, and the answer I had is that they are Cherokee, and they don't believe that an elected official or even the majority of the tribe can take that away from them any more than they could do that to you. They believe they're Cherokee because their parents were Cherokee, their grandparents were Cherokee, their great-grandparents are Cherokee. They've been citizens of the tribe since the 1860s. This didn't happen yesterday. So to take that away in 2007 from people that have already had it, they're offended by it. And from a personal level, I believe them and I'll fight for them, and I know a lot of them that's exactly what they stand for.
This has been an exciting week for the Cherokee Nation and our businesses. We opened a new casino in Ramona, and I stand before you as the first chief to say these words. 100% of the new hires were Cherokee.
It's because there's such an influx of gaming revenue. Most people believe that every Indian gets an annuity payment. Cherokees don't pay out annuities. What they do is they create jobs. They create businesses and they create programs. Most people don't understand that. They think every Indian is making big time bucks and they want a piece of that.
I think it is hypocritical for people to say that I am eligible to access those programs when I need them, but because you're black, you can't. That you're only here to get those services.
The freedmen are entitled to their share of the increasing wealth of their tribes. For years, there was no money in Indian country. There finally is. Indian gaming generates $30 billion a year in revenue. That's an enormous amount. There's only 2 million Indians in America. And the tribes together generate almost $30 billion a year. The black members of those tribes have been generally excluded from those benefits. I think they deserve to share them. It's their history.
Cherokee Nation gets a lot of flack for being thin blood tribe. I don't know if you've heard that term, but a lot of Cherokees do appear white or indistinguishable from Europeans. So it does appear that it's a mostly white group, excluding black people.
Last month, I had the honor to meet President Obama at a Native American roundtable. And one of the tribal leaders goes, Mr. President, the next time you get the opportunity to nominate a Supreme Court justice, we would want Native Americans to be at the table in the vetting process to make sure that individual understands and knows Indian issues. And he said that, he said, by all means, he will do that. And so I leaned over and said, well, Mr. President, I would want to say that, the next time you get to nominate a Supreme Court nominee, that it be a Native American. And he leans over to me and said, hey, man, I just met you. I can't nominate you Supreme Court. And everybody just busted up laughing. It was great. But, yeah, that was really a highlight. I don't know how long I'll have this job, but that will be one of the highlights. Yeah. The Cherokee Nation has many faces. Chief John Ross, the most famous Cherokee patriot and greatest principal chief this tribe has ever known. This is my great-great-great-grandfather, something that I'm very proud of. He was 1/8 Cherokee. I'm 1/8, the same blood quantum that Chief John Ross was. I'm not an identifiable Indian. I could go down walk down the street, no one's going to say, oh, well, there goes a Cherokee. If someone thinks that's just because we're light-skinned that we don't live a Cherokee life or believe in the Cherokee ways, well, I'm just going to have to, sadly disagree with them.
Brown had his necktie and belt removed, replaced by shackles. He walked by here, free man, about half an hour ago. Back in about 1985, I was working for CBS News, and they sent me to Oklahoma.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Ford. Earlier this month,
After I finished doing an interview with the chief of the Cherokee tribe, who at that time was named Ross Swimmer, I said to him, my folks have always been connected to the Cherokees. Look in your roll book and see if you can find us. And he looked in his roll book, and he's found my father, and he found my aunt, and he found my grandmother. And he said, yeah, well, they're on the freedmen rolls. And we said, freedmen, what are they? He said, well, they're the former slaves.
I was set on a mission to find out how my family became slaves of the Indians. Every summer at Tahlequah, Oklahoma, the Cherokee Indians sponsor their Trail of Tears pageant, the story of how the U.S. government robbed the so-called 5 civilized tribes of their homelands in the South and moved them by force to Oklahoma. They don't tell about the thousands of blacks the tribes brought with them, their slaves.
The slave trade was introduced by white slave owners into what I would call the aristocracy of the Cherokee Nation and the Indian nations. Most full-bloods were not slave owners. It was the mixed bloods, the people who lived like white planters. They were the ones that had slaves. Masters frequently made use of female slaves, and those slaves produced children.
At the Cherokee Museum today are slave bills of sale, including one for 3 slaves bought in 1841 by then Principal Chief John Ross. The chief and his brother Lewis were among the biggest slaveholders in the tribe. Indeed, many of my mother, Kathleen's ancestors, the Rosses, were owned by the chief's family.
During the Civil War, the so-called 5 civilized tribes here in Oklahoma officially sided with the Confederacy. After the Confederacy lost the Civil War, the tribes executed agreements, generally called the Treaty of 1866, with the federal government. In those agreements, or those treaties, 4 of the 5 tribes, the Chickasaws being the exception, agreed to accept their former enslaved persons of African ancestry as citizens of the various tribes.
We believe in the Treaty of 1866. There is obviously a difference of interpretation as to Article 9 of that treaty. Now, if you read that treaty, and what that treaty says is that freedmen and their descendants will have the rights of native Cherokees. That does not guarantee citizenship.
To me, the 1866 treaty is pretty clear. It says that they would have all the rights of native Cherokees. Well, if you have all the rights of native Cherokees, why are we going through all this?
Well, my name is David Cornsilk, and I grew up in Adair County, a county in Oklahoma that has the highest poverty, but also has the highest number of American Indians in the state. My dad was involved in tribal politics, and I became involved in it. My dad's almost a full-blood. He's 7/8 degree of Cherokee blood. My dad's mother was full-blood. My other side of my family that are Cherokees, they're all full-bloods and all Cherokee speakers and very traditional people. The only thing that I don't have in my Cherokee ancestry is a freedman. I love the Cherokee Nation, and the freedman issue was real important to me. I was working at PetSmart. I had been there almost 3 years at the time that Lucy Allen's case came up. Lucy Allen is a freedman descendant. I met her at a meeting of freedmen at the North Tulsa Regional Library. She lives right in the heart of North Tulsa. Most, if not all, of her neighbors are African American. Most of them are descendants of freedmen.
The chief claims that as long as you have Indian blood, that you're welcome and that they want you in there, but that's not true.
She had stood up and had talked about what had happened to her at Cherokee Nation when she had gone in to apply for citizenship. I saw the pain in her eyes. I saw how she perceived herself as a Cherokee. She didn't see herself as just a black woman. She saw herself as a Cherokee.
Lord Jesus, Lord, give them a blessing, Lord Jesus. Lord, bless them to go back home safe.
And that wasn't any intentional representation on her part. It just came across in how she spoke and the things that she said and how she lived her life. All of her records indicate that both of her parents were of Cherokee Indian blood descent, but their blood was not counted because of their African ancestry. A couple of times she told me that when she had applied and then she had gone back down to check on the status of her application, it could not be located. The presumption being that it was probably thrown away. And her question was, what can we do? And my response was, let's sue them. It was one of those issues that I felt like could be resolved internally, that the Cherokees themselves could fix it in tribal court. We filed our lawsuit in November of 2004 to reclaim her citizenship. I acted as a lay advocate. I'm not a lawyer, but the traditional Cherokee view of law was that if you could understand Cherokee law, then you could practice law in our courts. I didn't have any tools. I had no computer, and I had to go buy one. Didn't even know if I had credit. I named it the Cherokee War Machine. The current Attorney General for the Cherokee Nation, Todd Hembry, was the attorney that I had to go up against in tribal court. He was very good at using the federal rules of civil procedure to undermine just about everything that I tried to do. I really didn't know the federal rules, but I became very familiar with them.
We have the right to do that.
What would happen would be I would get home from work and open my mailbox, and there would be another filing from Todd Hembry. And so my evenings were taken up with answering those, doing research. Most of the time, it was really interfered more with my personal life than it did anything. I had no life. Well, I'd gone to work at PetSmart not thinking about the Allen case at all. The court had said that they would take all of the filings under advisement and would issue a ruling within a couple of weeks, and it was already over a month. I was in the back loading dog food, and I hear my name over the paging system, to come to the office. They had told me I had a phone call. And so I answered the call, and it turned out to be Lisa Fields, the court clerk. All of the staff of PetSmart were hanging around the office watching these pages fall out of the fax machine. I would read one and then hand it to the next person and hand it to the next person. And they were reading the ruling almost as quickly as I was, and they were all just amazed. They didn't realize, I don't think anybody there actually knew, that I had been acting as a lay advocate in the tribal court. And she asked me if I was sitting down. So I sat down, and she said, "You won." I cried. It felt good. I felt vindicated. I had taken a lot of abuse, a lot of verbal abuse from people. I was called, an inn lover, and, all kinds of terrible things were said about me.
David Cornsilk was able to win this case. I thought the case was lost. I thought, wow, okay, so there is some justice in this Cherokee Nation. And this wasn't something the U.S. government did. This was something the Cherokee Nation did. I mean, my grandmother had her tribal rights. My mother had her tribal rights. My father had his. But these smart lawyers took ours away. And this guy, David Cornsilk, got them back to us.
After reading the decision, it seemed airtight. That I thought it's over. We've got our victory. Everything is going to be okay from here on out.
Oversee the truthfulness and the systems of the.
Well, you think you're in, and then here comes some guy named Chad Smith, who wants to kick the blacks out.
I never expected that he would spend millions of dollars to try to get the freedmen kicked out of the tribe. Because there were lots of other issues pressing in the tribe. There's health care and education, housing, all of those things that are important to the individual tribal members. Every time he used the word freedmen, he never failed to include the non-Indian freedmen. So that created an image in the mind of the Cherokees that these people are just non-Indians doing what non-Indians have done for the last 500 years, and that is take something from us. He called a special election for March 13th.
I was actually surprised at the resources that were marshaled to get that amendment done at such a quick pace. But the Cherokee people went through the constitutional process, and it was voted on, and it was passed, and it became a part of the Constitution, the same Constitution that I swore to uphold when I took my oath of office. In my opinion, race has nothing to do with this. This is not a racial issue. As I said earlier, it is a sovereignty issue.
We're not kicking them out because of their color. We're kicking them out because They don't have Cherokee blood. And that's the way it should be.
When you know what you really are and you haven't been embraced or acknowledged, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's horrible. I tell my kids, and they look at me with a third eye like, Dad, he's always making up stuff. They don't believe me, but I have the facts. I have the paperwork. I show them, they be like, what? I said, this is you. This is your great-great-grandmother.
In the early part of the 20th century, the federal government had as official policy to break up the Indian nations.
The demand to open Indian territory to settlement grew rapidly.
So they created this body called the Dawes Commission. The Dawes Commission was designed to create registers of the various Indian tribes for purposes of allotting or parceling out individual land parcels. And Native Americans typically had held land in common.
It was a system designed to exterminate the Cherokee Nation as a government entity and to allot our commonly held lands and to take surplus lands and sell it.
We have these Dawes agents who were white, and what they did was when people approached them to be registered on the Dawes rolls, if they looked like they had any kind of African ancestry, they were put on a roll called the Freedman Roll. Other people were put on a roll that's now called the Blood Roll. So their names were registered and their quantum or amount of Indian blood was registered. A lot of freedmen did in fact have native blood, but they were classified as strictly of African descent. You know, one drop of black blood essentially contaminates the person to this inferior status. So most of the freedmen, even if they have blood ancestry, they can't prove it because their ancestry is on the freedman roll, not on the blood roll.
Thank you.
What we usually do when I do a research is I'll look on the federal census to see where they are, and I'll look to see if they're on the Dawes and any previous records. They are on here as freedmen.
Okay.
The situation with the Cherokee Nation and the Cherokee Freedmen is kind of up in the air while there's 2 court cases going on right now. Until they decide the outcome of those 2 court cases, the Cherokee Nation is not accepting any freedmen applications for citizenship at this time.
Everybody knows that there's all kinds of blacks that are Cherokee by blood. DNA would probably tell you that he goes back to some of the same chiefs that I go back to. But DNA is not our test. Doesn't matter the circumstance. If they didn't sign up on the Dawes, they cannot be members of the Cherokee Nation.
Well, was you born a slave? Yes, sir. What was your owner's name? Mackey was his answer.
I'll be the last person in the world to get up here and defend the Dawes Rolls Commission. If we could go back and redo the Dawes Commission, and though it never happened, I'd be the first one to do that. But our people have spoken. They want you to be an Indian by blood to be a member of the Cherokee Nation. And I respect their opinion, and it is my solemn duty to carry out their wishes.
We've already paid a tremendous price just to get where we are today. I mean, we've lost land, we've lost people. The fight that we fight today is to maintain our culture, and at some point you have to draw a line in the sand. It's not about the money. If you don't fight, they take more.
If you voted against the freedmen because they're black, then you're a racist. If you voted against the freedmen because you think they don't have Cherokee blood and you didn't do research to find out the truth, then you're a racist. If you voted against the freedmen because you don't think they should have citizenship in this nation because their skin is darker than yours, their hair is curlier than yours, then you're a racist. You cannot hide behind being an Indian. You don't get special privileges to be a racist just because you're an Indian. You have to face the same maker that I face. You have to face the same judgment that I face. And racism is a sin. It's the sin of all 300,000 Cherokees.
What you said, I'll never forget. I'll never forget. I appreciate that because I know where that came from. Yeah. That came from inside Miss Lucy and all that. So I appreciate you, your time.
We are one of the 5 slave-holding nations, and we have a responsibility to repair that and to do what is right by those people that we held as slaves, whether they have our blood or not. And I don't believe that someone should have to have blood of the master to be able to come in the house.
People do what you let them do. The Native Americans are building schools. They are building hospitals. I mean, you know, it's a good and it's a bad to each side, you know. But I know what it is to sit in the back of the bus. I know what it is to have to go to the back of a restaurant and eat. I told you about John Cutcher, my great-great-grandfather. He was killed out there south of Wewoka. They drug him down the streets in Wewoka. The hanging tree at the courthouse, which sits there in the museum, the hanging tree is still there.
We have a right to get angry. It's about color. And when it comes down to it, they don't want the black people to have anything.
They want it all for themselves. They want to cut the freedmen out. We are going to stand, and we're going to stand. It's like how the Jericho wall came down in the Bible. This wall is getting ready to come down. Enough is enough, and it's time for us to stand up as black freedmen and say what's on our mind and have no fear.
Oklahoma has a long history of racism, and I think that plays into how the Cherokees perceived the freedmen.
Oklahoma becomes a state in 1907. What it essentially does is mimic its southern sisters in terms of race relations and racial oppression.
First law passed by the legislature of the state of Oklahoma was segregation of rail cars. That was law number 1. There were lynchings, and blacks were considered the bottom of the barrel of the population, and American Indians who lived traditionally were not too far above them in the views of the white people who were dominating this state.
Tulsa has an interesting history. In fact, it's kind of the condensed history of the U.S. At the very earliest part of the city's foundings, we had this very vibrant black culture here. Greenwood District was known as America's Black Wall Street, one of the great African American communities in the nation. And of course, the 1921 Tulsa race riot occurred and obliterated it.
This was not a race riot. This was an assault on the black community. The police did very little. Some members of the police actually deputized some people in the mob that invaded the Greenwood community. It obliterated roughly 35 square block area.
The Cherokee people had to decide in that time period, where do we fit in this racially stratified state? A good portion of the Cherokees were mixed bloods, and many of them had been slave owners themselves, and so they fit in pretty well. In the 1920s, the Grand Wizard of the KKK in Oklahoma was a Cherokee.
More people are turning to the Klan. The Southern Poverty Law Center reports there are 6 Klan chapters in Oklahoma. That's compared to only 2 back in 2001. And that's only the beginning of what membership could be, according to a former Klansman.
If something is not done, I guarantee you, I can promise you right now, you will see a rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan, possibly like the 1960s and the 50s all over again.
North Tulsa is a predominantly African-American community. It's delineated by Admiral Street, which is actually the Cherokee boundary. And most of the people who live there of African descent are also descended from Cherokee and Creek freedmen.
A lot of things have come and gone in this community. I mean, used to have things that you got to go south for now. It seems like we just been skipped over as far as, you know what I'm saying, things that we need in our own community to make our community grow, you know.
I'm looking at why all this money that they spending on the South Side been fixed up. South Side been fixed for years. You come out north, we don't have no big we don't even have a grocery store out here. Ain't no sidewalks. It's a lot more anger, animosity, hostility. You can just feel it once you cross Pine. You can just, it's like you're in a whole nother city, a whole nother time zone. It's not even justifiable. It's not even justifiable. That's why I said, I look at it as like it's a war zone. It's a war zone.
I stay on the north. That's where I live. I live on the north.
Poverty is ghetto, it's high crime rates, it's murders, it's drugs, it's, you know what I'm saying?
We could live in a ghetto, shoot each other, rob each other, but we choose to honor the traditional way, and that's to help others and be there for each other.
Why would two white men in Tulsa, Oklahoma, open fire on 5 African Americans they apparently didn't even know? 19-year-old Jake England and 32-year-old Alvin Watts are being held tonight on suspicion of first-degree murder in the deaths early Friday morning of 3 men and the wounding of 2 others.
When I first heard about the murders, I believed the media reports that it was 2 white men. As soon as I saw his picture and saw his name, I knew he was Cherokee.
It was Friday, about 1 o'clock in the morning. Me and my friend David was standing on the porch. A truck pulled up and asked us about directions. I tell them down the street. Next thing I know, they started shooting. When he shot me in my chest, they shot my homeboy David in the stomach. They drove off. Then they went around the corner and shot somebody else. This state as a whole is racist. It's always been racist. You know what I'm saying? It's just, this here is just bringing it out some, but it's been racist. This ain't nothing new. We've been going through this. It's just white people ain't been coming out here shooting us. But we've been going through this, man.
I thought it was gonna be another race riots like back in 1921, like Tulsa already had the worst race riots. It's just like crazy because we just such a small town.
5 people got shot, 3 people got killed. I knew 2 of them that got killed, you know what I'm saying? But that shit goes on all the time. Tulsa is very racist. Oklahoma's very racist. They try to hide behind the Bible Belt and this and that. Very racist, man.
Most states, a hate crime is a felony. What is it in Oklahoma? A misdemeanor.
Who does that? Who does those type of things, man? You know what I'm saying? Just on some hate. I mean, are you serious, man? It's 2012, man. We still there. We ain't, you know what I'm saying? When are we ever gonna get past that, man? You know what I'm saying? This race thing, man. You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous, man.
We'll never be in
The song was captured from at least 2 camera angles, but the disgust is coming from all sides. Hundreds of students marched on the campus of the University of Oklahoma, still reeling over what was recorded aboard that bus.
Some Oklahomans found a big surprise in their yards today after the KKK leaves recruitment flyers on lawns in 4 small towns. Residents woke up to find the flyers this morning.
Kelly and Amanda, the flyers were left at homes in Boley, Payton, Okemah, and Prague.
My father was born in 1905, and I'm not telling my age. We were born in the same house. This is the old Bowley water tower that was built in 1921. It is still standing as if you see in need of repair. Who wouldn't want to be born in Bowley? If you gotta be born someplace, could you think of any place else? It's home.
Oklahoma, through the course of history, had about 50 all-black towns where black people could live essentially unmolested and relatively independently. Think of what the alternative was at the time, living, for a lot of these people, living in the Deep South under really oppressive conditions.
Hi, Ross. This is Ross, Miss Cudjoe's grandson, a descendant of the Cudjoes. He is a Seminole freedman.
Yesterday when I was going down the stairs, when I was on his bottom step, I slipped 3 times.
Did you hurt yourself?
No.
To have a grandson being born in Bowley and the legacy of my family and my husband's family, I think it's the greatest thing could have happened.
That horse would get a printing. They get a printing.
Bowley, Oklahoma, established in 1903, May 11, 1905. Bowley Creek Nation.
In the day, Bowley was what was happening. You know, in the days we partied, we drink whiskey, we did whatever else. But Bowley was the going thing. Oh, Jesus, it was just, it was lit up like a Christmas tree.
On Saturday night, you couldn't haul across the street from one side of the street to the other because the traffic be so heavy, bumper to bumper.
It was freedom. I think it will be prosperous again. Maybe not in my generation. It might be in Ross's. But you know what, go around, come around. So I think it will live again.
See, this is a Seminole Nation card. And on the back of it, it says voting benefits only. So the Seminole freedmen won back their citizenship. But now the Seminoles, now that the spotlight's on the Cherokee and not them, have refused to give them any benefits other than voting rights. Any sort of funding that goes towards the tribe, they get none of it. You can't be half of a citizen. You either are or you're not.
Man, you're going to have to figure out you're going to cuff them pants. Come on here, man.
I know that.
Did you bring another belt other than this one?
Cause my mama gave me another belt. No, okay. It's the only belt I bring.
Okay, no problem. It says my card can't be used for nothing but voting. And that's what separates us right there. Now, you looking good. Where's your hat at?
Oh, in the truck.
All right, get it on. We have a steer wrestling team. And this is my first year on the all-Indian circuit. My phone. As far as the rodeoing, you don't see no difference. You're treated just like a regular cowboy.
Thanks.
It means a lot. It means a lot to represent my tribe. Do you want to pray?
Lord, I thank you for all the things that you've done. Lord, I just pray that we come out victorious tonight, that me and my dad bring home some money, Lord. In the name we pray, amen.
Amen, amen.
Dews come down on me this morning like a shower rain. Makes me think of my sweet woman. Can't recall her name. Can't recall her name, my Lord. I can't recall her name. Makes me think of my sweet woman. Can't recall her name.
Esther Graham 4-3, no time on his first one. We're set to go with Rashawn Jones, Boley, Oklahoma. A member of the Seminole tribe, 5-8 in his first attempt last night. He's back to work for us again this evening. Well, tough luck for Rashawn Jones. No time for his efforts and only a consolation.
I want to thank the members of Congress who are here. Most of all, I want to thank all of you, especially the tribal leaders who are here today. You represent more than 300 tribal nations, each of you with your own extraordinary heritage, each a vital part of a shared American family. And as a proud adopted member of the Crow Nation, let me say, Kahe, welcome. We have a unique legal and political relationship, one that's been affirmed many times in treaties and statutes and in the Constitution. That's the relationship we're called upon to sustain for the progress of all of our peoples.
So in 2007, I was sitting here at the house, and I was on my computer, and I was looking at Yahoo, and I was reading the news articles. And there was this article about the Cherokee freedmen and the fact that they had been kicked out of the tribe. About 15 minutes later, my sister, who lives in California, called me up. And she said, "Did you read that article about the Cherokee freedmen?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's really crazy, isn't it?" She said, "That really is crazy." And says, "So what are you going to do about it?" I felt that we needed to write some kind of legislation.
Something had to be done to get justice for these people, the freedmen, who were being badly treated.
And our last headline takes us just south of Kansas to Oklahoma. Congresswoman Diane Watson of California introduced a bill in the House yesterday that would sever all federal ties to the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma.
The bill was about removing the funding from the Cherokee Nation, removing recognition of the Cherokee Nation government until such time as they comply with the Treaty of 1866. And that meant putting the freedmen back in.
The Department of Interior annually gives somewhere around $300 million to the Cherokee Nation. And so we just said, listen, we're not going to allow you to take taxpayers' money to discriminate against freemen and their descendants. The legislation also suspends the Cherokee Nation's right to conduct gaming operations until it complies with all of its statutory obligations.
It was going to suspend their gaming rights. I honestly did not realize how powerful the Cherokee Nation's response was going to be.
The Cherokee Nation has spent a fortune on this case through lobbying efforts and attorneys and public relations campaigns.
They hired a top-notch attorney, Lanny Davis, and they spent millions of dollars lobbying Capitol Hill.
Some members of Congress are using these falsehoods to justify legislation that would terminate the Cherokee Nation, casting it aside, and cutting off necessary funding for its neediest residents. Threats of termination by Congress set a dangerous precedent.
This was an incredibly controversial issue. This was rapping at the door of the whole sovereignty issue, which is very important in Indian country.
Whether it's through a blood quantum, whether it's through a paper trail, whatever your criteria is for membership, that is our criteria, not the federal government's. Interference of the federal government dealing with the Cherokee Nation's issues, that is clearly an intrusion.
As long as we continue to be a sovereign nation, then the United States government can't diminish our rights as being people, being human, being Lakota, being Indian. You fight for that reason. That's the only ace in the hole that the Indians have is the sovereignty.
Tribal people should govern themselves. You don't need somebody from the outside telling you who should be in and who should be out.
We need to make sure that we respect the sovereignty of the tribes and their nation and respect and honor the commitments and treaties that have been made generations ago.
It is tribal sovereignty that's the key to prosperity and to every economy that any Indian nation has. When tribal sovereignty is threatened anywhere in the country, it's threatened everywhere.
The bill did not say the United States tells the Cherokees they must do this. They were telling the Cherokee Nation that, yeah, we can go ahead and we can remove the freedmen, we can violate the treaty, but there are consequences. You are not going to do these things on the U.S. Taxpayers' dime.
They signed a treaty with the federal government. This is the federal government enforcing its treaty rights. At the very least, the U.S. government has the right to contest the interpretation. The notion that this is interference in their autonomy or even sovereignty is just not, it doesn't begin to be true.
Frankly, when I started off, I thought this would be a slam dunk, that I'd get all the Black Caucus members to sign on to it. And it wasn't like that at all. Nobody wanted to touch this bill. It was like a poison pill, even to talk about it after a while.
The Cherokees told the NAACP and the leadership of many of the African American community that if you do this, if you stand for these African Americans becoming members of the Cherokee Nation, then you are beating up an Indian tribe. And we've been beat up enough. We're victims. And they played the victim card quite well.
If Congress was to cut funding to our program, there would be a devastating blow to a lot of people, like 140,000, individuals that receive help a year.
We usually think of the tribes as the victims of injustice, which is true. It's counterintuitive for a lot of people to think of Indian tribes as having been the perpetrators of injustice, but victims can do bad things too. It's a clear case of racial injustice.
We never got a hearing, and the bill eventually died.
I think the leadership of the African American community simply backed down, walked away, sacrificing this small African American population, leaving them to solve this on their own.
President Obama didn't want to touch this because he needs support from Indian country. He needs support from the tribes. And for him to have taken on this issue would have precluded any kind of support he could have gotten. And it's not to say that he got much support because he didn't win one county in Oklahoma, but it just would have made his relations that much worse. I continued to lobby on the issue in any way that I could, whether it was writing articles, making statements for the Congresswoman to be put in the press, writing letters to the editor, writing op-eds. Tried to continue to keep it before the public.
After I became president, I said that given the painful chapters and broken promises in our shared history, I'd make sure this country kept its promises to you. I promised that tribal nations would have a stronger voice in Washington, that as long as I was in the White House, it would be your house too. And for the past 5 years, my administration's worked hard to keep that promise, to build a new relationship with you based on trust and respect. standing up for justice and tribal sovereignty, increasing economic opportunity, expanding quality health care, protecting native homelands. This is the foundation we can build on. This is the progress that we can make together. I want you to know that's what I'm working for. That's the partnership that I cherish, and I will cherish as long as I have the honor of serving as your president. So thank you.
I'm critical of the Obama administration for not moving on the freedmen once they came in. I'm disappointed the Justice Department hasn't been more active.
It is an issue that is still being played out in the courts to this day. And that was 2007, and now it's almost 2014, and the issue is still being played out in the courts. And it would not surprise me if it's not another 7 years from the courts. It's a war of attrition. That's why it's taken so long. These battles have all been fought before. They're the same battles that have been fought for 100 years. They've all been fought before. It's really sad. Very sad.
The current Cherokee administration has agreed to let down the guard of the technical defenses and try this case, the freedmen. It's their time finally to tell their story, and I'm honored to be part of that. We've spent the last few days at the Pillsbury Law Firm. Pillsbury's a national firm, turning over the law and facts and trying to assemble oral argument. I mean, wouldn't the judge say, look, the order will be the Cherokee argument first, the U.S. argument, then our argument. So it's a good position for us because the U.S. agreed with us. So it's a little bit of 2-on-1.
Are you saying, Mr. Veely, that when they said all the rights of Native Cherokees, that necessarily included citizenship?
I believe it meant citizenship. And you know, this tribe and the Seminoles have used these words in ways to distinguish it. And I think it doesn't matter what words you say. All the rights of Native Cherokees can be equivalent to citizenship. If citizens means you have all the rights, if member means you have all the rights, if Indian means you have all the rights, that has to be equal, no matter what you label it. Would that be a safe way to answer this? Because I think getting back and forth on what citizen is and not citizen is, does it give them an out somehow?
Well, I come back fundamentally to the fact that all the rights of Native Cherokees necessarily includes the rights of the citizen. That's who they are. That's
right.
Who they are.
What else could it mean?
It certainly includes the right of citizenship, and it's arguably broader than that.
Yeah.
Under the Cherokee Nation's theory that it means something less, they've offered no evidence as to what that less is.
Right, there you go.
I'll see you. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Best of luck. Appreciate it.
We're hoping that we finally get an ultimate decision this time. But we're here to fight it for the duration. We may have to continue to fight this even if we win again, and we will. Yeah, I'm tired, but I'm battle ready to get in there and fight for this on Monday.
Isn't that something?
When nothing else can communicate for you, but the Spirit of God.
Indian people are known for opening their doors. We take care of each other. We help each other. We're there for each other. When one cries, they all cry. What's going on today, I know with all my heart that it's not that we're discriminating against the freedmen. And if they can't show that they got Cherokee blood, then how can they be a Cherokee? Just because a piece of paper that we were forced to agree to? We have a reason for holding on to our ways. I never look at culture or tradition as something that you can discard. Once you find it, you just keep moving deeper.
Gather round you, wounded people. Shadows fall upon the steeple. Soon shall come the closing of the gates. For there is word of plague among us. Curse the one whose poison stung us, and all along the alleyways the satyrs